o'clock, and I'd like to open the October 29th school committee meeting. This meeting is being held virtually through Zoom. The town of Littleton began conducting remote participation / Zoom meetings pursuant to Governor Baker's emergency order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law on March 19th, 2020. Since that time, unanticipated legal concerns relating to the open meeting law have been brought to our attention by the town clerk. Those concerns were supported by the Attorney General's office and confirmed by town council. One concern is that the chat function allows a parallel text conversation to a board's public meeting. Chat is essentially running commentary that is occurring but is not moderated or followed by the chair. All participants and listeners may not be aware of comments being made because some meeting participants join by phone and do not see these conversations. Another concern is conversations between residents within the chat room, which are not incorporated into the public record. In response to these concerns, the town will implement the following changes, which in no way prohibit any member of the public from participating in discussion and sharing information during a public meeting, and will ensure that all listeners and participants have equal access to this meeting. People that join the Zoom meeting are set so their microphones are muted. If you called in by phone, please use *6 to mute or unmute your phone. So that the meeting can occur in an orderly fashion, we ask the people who join keep their microphones on mute so background noises do not interfere with the meeting. If you wish to participate in the meeting, please use the raise your hand function available on Zoom, or if you called in by phone, dial *9, which will activate the raise your hand function. The meeting host will notify the chair of the raised hands, and the chair will determine whether and when to allow public comment. When called upon, participants should unmute and state their name and address. After speaking, we request that the participant return their microphone back to mute. All right. I'd like to start the meeting with the consent agenda, the minutes from October 22nd, 2020, and oath to bills and payroll.
Make a motion to approve the oath to bills and payroll, the minutes and oath to bills and payroll from October 22nd, 2020.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Is there any further discussion on that motion? Hearing none, I'll remind everyone that all our votes on Zoom are roll call votes. I'll start with Timolin.
Timolin Rossius, yes.
Justin.
Justin McCarthy, yes.
Brad.
Brad Austin, yes.
Matt.
Matt Hunt, yes.
And Mike Fontanella votes yes as well. At this point, we are at the first of at least 2 opportunities for input from interested citizens. If anybody would like to bring anything up before the school committee, please use the raise your hand function, and Dorothy Malone, our meeting moderator, will put you in front of us.
I don't see any hands. Chairman Fontanella?
All right, let's just wait a couple of seconds and see if anybody's still thinking. All right, does not look like it. That's all right. If you use the raise your hand function at any point, we will try to recognize you. All right, going into recognition, Dr. Clenchey, is there anything under this particular agenda item this evening?
I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Mike Lynn, the coaches, students, and families for working together to get our fall sports season started. Really nice to see our students back on the field again, and we're looking forward to getting some more information about our winter sports season, since winter is just around the corner.
All right. And as such, why don't we segue? We're going to move the agenda a little bit. We had Mike Lynn on the agenda a little bit later because we thought he might possibly be busy doing some coaching, but because it was such a crummy day and evening, he's available right now. So we'll let him make his presentation right now. Mike?
Great. Thanks for inviting me back. And I do have a few slides that I'll wait for those to come up. Okay, so just going to give everybody an update. It was quite a while ago that I was virtually here, so show you what we've been doing since then. If we could go to the next slide, please. So here's us our sports that we offered in Fall 1 with the participation levels. They were pretty consistent with what we would see pre-COVID. Maybe a down a few in girls soccer, maybe down a few in field hockey as well, but for the most part, pretty healthy. We were able to offer in the sports that we typically offer, JV and field hockey and boys and girls soccer. We were able to sustain those programs, JV in all three of those. And then golf and boys and girls cross country have always been varsity only. One thing that we did add on early October, we started some football practices per our district guidelines. We're doing 10 non-padded, non-contact practices during the fall one here to try and get a jump start on fall two if we're fortunate enough for that to happen. And so we have 43 with football, and then cheer has 18 who they opted not to practice just because the guidelines were somewhat prohibitive to maybe getting a lot done. So, but we're pleased with our numbers. We're pleased with our participation numbers. So I think we could go to the next slide. Just where we're at with our records. We're better than halfway through all of the seasons, and you can see there that cross country has, most of our teams are enjoying quite successful seasons in terms of wins and losses. Cross country actually only has two dual meets left. We removed one, but they have two more duels plus what we're calling a pod meet, which is somewhat of a modified championship meet with the schools in the pod. Varsity golf, all they have left is a pod tournament, again a modified one, and then we have pod playoffs left in the varsity sports of field hockey and boys and girls soccer. That will be interpod playoffs, just to try and give the kids that playoff feel, even though we were unable to do MIA tournaments, but we're trying to give them that playoff excitement. So there's all our current records, including the JV teams even as well. Everybody's probably had a good look at that. We could go to the next slide. As far as winter sports update, I wish I had more news to share. I really do wish I had more news to share from my own perspective, but we just don't. It's unfortunately the way the fall one season went was we were waiting and waiting and waiting, and then the EEA guidelines came, and then the MIA guidelines came, and the modifications, and it was frantic to get up and running but we did get it done. But it'd be nice to have a little more time to plan appropriately and have the discussions that need to take place with coaches and school committees and principals and superintendents. But the fall season has gone tremendously, and I'm sure if we're fortunate enough to have a winter one, we'll be able to pull it together. But currently, the winter sports season, the start and stop dates are still 11:30 to 2:21. I wouldn't be surprised if that 11:30 date moves back. But as of right now, it still is that date. We're still awaiting EEA guidelines, and then MIA sport-specific guidelines would follow. The word we have is that the EEA guidelines will hopefully be available in early November. They wanted to gather as much data as possible from the fall one season to probably make informed decisions, I assume, for the new EEA guidelines. One thing I will say that is a little frustrating on the interscholastic side is that currently the EEA guidelines cover youth, adult, and high school sports all under one set of guidelines. As athletic directors, we feel like we should probably be a separate set of guidelines or an amended set of guidelines because, one of the key differences between interscholastic sports and youth and adult is the amount of oversight over interscholastic sports is much greater. You have athletic directors who answer the principals, who answer the superintendents and school committees. Just there's a lot of oversight, and not to mention the MIA, the governing body for interscholastic sports. And we feel like, as far as when guidelines are issued to us, we feel like we adhere to them to the absolute utmost level. And as we've seen with some activities like ice hockey, club ice hockey and youth ice hockey with the rinks shutting down in Massachusetts, New Hampshire, I'm not sure that's always happening at the youth and adult levels. But we're hoping that might happen because, again, we just feel like when we have guidelines, we follow them very, very closely with a lot of oversight with multiple eyes. Based on a recent vote by the MIA, it looks by the track and field committee. It appears that indoor track will likely be moved to the fall 2 season. The MIA track and field committee took a vote, and the vote was 15-0 to recommend that to the board of directors. So we're anticipating that indoor track and field will probably move to fall 2, given the challenges that we would have trying to run that sport within the winter season structure with facilities, mainly with facilities. And I wanted to, and then the other sports in the winter, we really don't have much direction or guidance yet. We're still waiting, basketball, ice hockey, swimming, skiing, gymnastics, all those other sports. Which brings me to that last bullet on the screen. I was hoping to have some discussion tonight regarding our cooperative teams. Some school committee members may not realize how many cooperative team scenarios we're a part of. They're all in the winter. We have no cooperative relationships in the fall or the spring. It tends to be the winter sports. Some of the winter sports are tricky for a smaller school to run. So boys ice hockey, excuse me, boys ice hockey, we are the host. We have been for probably going on 15 years with Bromfield School, a very, very strong co-op relationship with that school in boys ice hockey, which we're the host. Girls ice hockey going on 6 to 8 years. We're the guest with Westford Academy. Very fortunate to be in that relationship with them. We usually average somewhere between six to as many as 10 girls that we send to that program to be able to play girls ice hockey. Boys, girls, swim, dive. We are the guest with Bromfield School. And that's been a long-standing cooperative, a sport that we would not be able to offer. Our numbers are typically about 10 student athletes that participate through that co-op. One that's only, I want to say, might be 3 to 4 years, the boys, girls, alpine skiing, which we're a guest, and that one is with Lunenburg, which you would think that Lunenburg's somewhat far away from us, but because it's mountain-based, it really doesn't matter, the proximity of the other schools. So we've been involved with that co-op with Lunenburg. And then the last one is a new one that has been, it's not a great time to be doing this, but I should say it's a renewal. Gymnastics is a co-op we had for a number of years. And then we no longer had student athletes that were interested in the sport, so it went away for a number of years. And now we have those girls apparently that are interested in gymnastics, and Groton Dunstable has asked us to be a guest in a co-op in gymnastics, which if we were to start it this winter would be a renewal of a co-op that we used to have, but we've had some gap years where we haven't had student athletes that were interested in it. So the key question is, after I've gone through our co-op relationships, where are we as a school district with the co-ops, given the limitations and the I don't know if the word's cohorts, but just trying to kind of build a wall around our schools and communities. Where are we with as far as moving forward with co-ops this winter?
Mike, do we have any information on ice hockey, swimming, if they're going to? I know we're waiting for guidance from the EEA and MIAA, but that's more or less to decide what modifications and if those sports, but like we know that hockey, like we don't have a rink, right? We have to get a rink. Are we going to be able to get ice time? What's the feasibility that we're even going to be able to, like, I don't know that we need to worry about the co-op if we can't get ice time for boys hockey, for instance.
So we've secured ice time. We're not bound to it by contract or anything yet. We've just secured the slots, so we're not on the hook to pay for it. That probably will come at some point. We've secured practice ice over at the rink in Acton, the Neshoba Valley Olympia.
Okay.
And it looks like our games will get played at the Wallace Civic Center in Fitchburg this year because the Groton School is not allowing outside customers. And the other thing about ice hockey is you're talking about quite a bit less than a normal season.
Mm-hmm.
We do have pods. We do have pod structures, tentative pod structures set up for ice hockey. We basically, as a district, agreed on about a 12-game season. So similar to what we did in the fall for hockey, which normally is a 20-game season, then playoffs. So if it were to happen, it would be a pod structure. It would be about 12 games based on the most recent Central Mass ice hockey. And that's another point I should make, is that ice hockey actually isn't considered a Midland Wachusett League sport. It's a Central Mass sport. It's its own league. Just because ice hockey is just different. There's not as many programs as there are for other sports, and just the way it's kind of rink based. We've always run as a Central Mass sport, so we're in the Coughlin Conference for that, as opposed to the Midwatch League. But so the structure is in place. We have secured practice ice time. We do have game ice time reserved, but nothing that we'd be bound to at this point if the season does not happen.
Okay. Do any of the school committee members have thoughts or questions about participating in co-op athletics, with either sending our students to participate with other schools or inviting Brownfield boys to play hockey with our guys? Brett?
Yeah, thanks for the presentation, Mike. I'll just confess, I have no idea what to think about this. As I'm thinking about it, I don't know, and I'm going to ask you for some guidance about what criteria we should be looking at in your mind, because as you said, athletic directors are thinking a lot about this. We're talking about mixing with other schools. We're getting confusing guidance at best from DESE about what to do if districts move into different colors. I don't know about the safety restrictions for like ice hockey or these, or indoor track or any of these other sports. Can you give us a just overview? I'm sorry if it's too simplistic a question, of just what are the main criteria in your mind, and maybe a sense of the kind of safety precautions some of these sports will be using?
Well, I do wish I had that answer. I'm actually on the state basketball committee, and we're still, again, waiting for those guidelines. I'm on the state basketball committee, but then there's a subcommittee for the COVID. I'm not on that. Once the guidelines come up, I do know that subcommittee has been working, but they have not revealed much of what they've been working on yet. They're probably preparing several scenarios based on what those EEA guidelines, if those EEA guidelines even allow basketball to be played in the state of Massachusetts. Ice hockey has will have similar. So I can't answer that yet. I can only speculate based off what I see in, say, team sports like field hockey and soccer, that I do believe that the guidelines could be somewhat dramatic, but once the kids and the coaches kind of adjust to it, all of a sudden the game doesn't look all that much different to the regular person. But so I don't really have a great answer on that yet, but I can come back when I do. I'm happy to do that.
Well, I appreciate that. I guess that was part of my thinking. If we don't know we can play basketball, but we do think we can play soccer. If we don't, we can play field hockey, but not football. It's just trying to figure out. Maybe it's because different groups are setting different guidelines. Just trying to figure out what the folks who've thought more about this than I have, how they're deciding what's safe and unsafe. It seems really confusing to me.
So I was a little confused. I didn't even know that there was an EEA. I didn't know what that was until this happened. I would have thought that the Department of Public Health would have set our guidelines, but Office of Energy and what is the Energy and Environmental Affairs? Again, I'm not really sure who's on that committee, but for whatever reason, they deemed basketball and ice hockey to be higher risk, contact lacrosse to be higher risk than, say, soccer and some other sports. So that were deemed moderate. So I don't know if they're going to downgrade those sports to moderate, if they're going to keep them at high risk, and then if they're going to then how restrictive the guidelines are going to be, and what, say, a sport like basketball might look like. If it's still a high risk sport and falls in that category, what will it look like in order to play competitive basketball versus another school? And certainly the co-ops, they do muddy the water a little bit as far as, now, yes, we will absolutely be kids will be interfacing with kids from another school on a daily basis, not just kids from Littleton High School. They'll be on a team with kids from Bromfield, on a team with kids from Westford Academy. And then I would think we'd have to almost keep track of those communities and ours. So, and certain sports to me seem, I can't see alpine skiing being that much of a problem, honestly. I just think it's easy to social distance in a sport like alpine skiing. So that's a different sport, as far a different discussion, I guess, than say basketball or ice hockey.
I'd agree with that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Mike, do I remember hearing earlier that if towns were in the red, that they wouldn't be participating in games? Did that take place, or is that still taking place?
So when we first started this, much like the school year, I don't think we had hopes and dreams of how it would go, but we weren't positive how this was going to go. And I think the initial dialogue as we were getting started was just that. But then as schools started to proceed through this, and I think there was more guidance provided by the governor in terms of the 3 weeks and things of that nature, and then looking more at not just saying as a community red, but looking more at the numbers, and then where do the numbers fall. So, I mean, there was a week when Littleton we were red for 1 week. I haven't actually looked at haven't looked at the rating for today.
2 weeks.
Red.
Oh, we're back to red?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we went red, yellow, and now we're red. We started, I think the dialogue now is taking more that where are the cases? In a town like Littleton, if we draw back to the beginning of this, when it was at the Life Care Center, that was certainly a situation that would have put us in the red, but I'm not sure that would say that kids at Littleton High School shouldn't participate in athletics. So I think it's turned more to a dialogue that I'm having on a pretty regular basis with Kelly and John. And, if we felt like we were at risk, then I'm sure we'd be taking action. But I don't think we're just saying, oh, town's in the red, they're going to go on, they're not going to participate during that time. I think in the very, very early part, that was probably the basic mindset. But then, this has kind of evolved, and we've learned a lot as we've gone through this fall 1 season, but certainly keeping an eye on the numbers and trying to be as safe as possible.
Sure. So a quick scan of the communities that we're collaborating with on those sports, they appear to be in line with Littleton's number. So I don't really have any concern about us participating in sports with them. I think the emphasis needs to be placed on the safety protocols that are taking place, not only on the field, off the field, in the makeshift locker room, because I think maybe that's hockey's problem, is not the time on the ice, but it might be the time off the ice. And that's why I think New Hampshire shut it down, and Mass is doing like a 2-week pause, and or at least they're anticipating on, suspensions on and off to get the numbers back where they need to be. So as long as we're vigilant and we can come to an agreement that there's going to be safe behavior as possible, I have no concern.
Yeah, I think if at any time that our school district or administration feels like, the risks outweigh the rewards at this point, we need to either take a break from competing or just shut it down completely. We would do that. I do know that I had a conversation with a colleague who was in a different pod, and this would be Oakmont, which is the Ashburnham Westminster district. And I was shocked at how quickly they went from like gray straight to, they actually they're taking a 2-week pause in their hybrid model, and they had to shut down their sports because I'm sure people heard about there was a church in Fitchburg, and then there was a dance facility in Fitchburg. And I guess that must've sprawled out into some surrounding communities. And, he was describing something that in the course of about 36 to 48 hours, they went from like 0 risk to they're going 2 weeks hybrid and had to shut down the sports. And, it's heartbreaking for, they only had been 2 weeks into hybrid. They started the year fully remote, moved into hybrid, and it was going great, but it can change quickly. And we just have to keep keep an eye on the metrics and make the right decision.
Good.
I actually had one more slide if,
Actually, well, let's keep going for a minute with
Okay,
discussion. Tim, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I just have a question, Mike. I know, Mike, Lynn, I know Groton Dunstable is in our co-op, our pod now.
yeah.
What are the are there other schools in our pods now? Like Bromfield and Westford, like with any
No.
other sports? I know they're not in soccer, but I didn't know what they,
No, so-
if they were.
So our pod is Groton Dunstable, Tingsboro, North Middlesex, Lunenburg, and Parker School, which is a tricky one because Parker School is in
Everybody.
the athletics world is known as a school without borders. So because it draws from, I'm not really sure how many communities it draws from. So it's tough to know what those kids are, where those kids are coming from as far as, on our perspective.
Right.
So those are our 6 schools. And
And those are for all the sports that are happening now, the fall sports? Those
Those-
are all fall sports now.
that's it. Those 6 schools that's
Okay.
the only schools we've interfaced with in our pod or in any athletic event.
Okay, thank you.
Tingsboro's the other town that I haven't seen their rating for today, but they have been in the red for 2 weeks, so they might be making a decision. I'm not sure.
I'm sorry, Mike. They went from, I have my notes, 8.9 to 9.5 to this week 18.5.
Oh wow.
So they doubled, and that's pretty high.
Yeah. So this weather right now, we didn't compete in any sports today. We're not competing in any sports tomorrow. We're not competing in any over the weekend. Gives us a little bit of time probably to take a step back and probably have a pod Zoom with the ADs, which we've been doing quite frequently. Again, talking about our schools, talking about our communities. Where do we have cases within our school? And I guess we'll probably be talking tomorrow based on what the new numbers that have come out.
Okay. Why don't we go ahead and I think we're good at the moment. Take a look at that last slide and we'll finish this one up.
So just the last slide, just some closing thoughts I had. And it's difficult to do this slide, and we're seeing increased numbers, and that's reality we're all living with. But based on my perspective, what I've seen, this fall one has probably been one of the greatest seasons I've had as an athletic director. And it's not a season where there's going to be extensive playoffs and state championships, but to see teams and kids get back doing things they enjoy, that's been very gratifying. Didn't help me in my household. My son's a football player and can't do it. But what I've witnessed for the kids that fall within those sports, that their overall physical, mental, emotional, and social health has been very, very strong. And because they're getting together every day after school with a group, and they're part of a team, they're part of a working towards a common goal. And I see it every day. I see it at practice. I see it at games. They adapted very quickly to wearing masks. I really haven't had any issues at all with the masks. We got off to a little bit slow start, and I got to tip my hat to the girls soccer captains. They found the best masks, these custom masks they found. And then we went and ordered those for all the kids. It wasn't that easy to find really good custom masks, but they did. And kids have adapted to wearing masks. They've adapted to the protocols and guidelines, and so have the coaches. It was touch and go in the beginning. It was so new and happening quickly, but now it's almost feels like routine. I just want to thank the school committee and the administration of the schools for support of our programs and giving us a chance to do the fall one, and trusting us that we would adhere to every guideline and we'd be vigilant about those things. And also the leadership during these challenging times. I know that there's been a lot of 3 and 4 hour, lengthy school committee meetings, and difficult decisions have had to be made. But I personally feel like we've made the right decisions. And I say that as an educator, and I say that as a parent who has a stake in the game here at Littleton High School, that, what the course we're taking, as long as we can stay on it, I believe is the right course. And the hybrid model it's better than not being in school at all, even though it's only 2 days a week. Those 2 days a week are critical. And sports have been tremendous for the kids who are able to take advantage of it. And my last bullet is just that, and I say this with a lot of pride, that our athletic department will do everything we can to make the lives of our student athletes as normal as possible this school year. And we do see ourselves as essential personnel and are willing to do whatever it takes within reason to get the job done. And unfortunately, there are no do-overs for our student athletes. You know, if we're unable to offer their sport, if we're unable to complete a season, you know, they're not going to get that back. And that's not anybody's fault. We're just going to try and do the best we can. But, you know, when it was time to really get going, I was very proud of our coaches because they answered the call very quickly and were ready to go. And we're thrilled to be able to get back doing what they love. And, you know, that was refreshing to see people ready to go and really help kids during this time. You know, it's for us as adults, when this is all over, we're going to look back on 2020 and just say, I hope there's never another year like that. But as we all know, for students, you know, this isn't just another year. It's their junior year, it's their senior year, or whatever it is. And they're not going to get this back. So whatever we can do safely, I think we're on the right course. And I appreciate the opportunity we had to do the fall one. And I hope we can do winter. Hopefully the numbers start looking better for us.
All right. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it. Appreciate your viewpoint. I think in terms of what we're thinking about for the winter, I really don't feel we have enough information at the moment to really make any determination. So I think the right thing to do is just to kind of wait and see. You know, we've been asking families and everybody to remain patient throughout all of this, and we're just going to continue to ask that. As soon as we know, we'll let people know what we think our options are and what we think we can do, and then we can determine what we think based on the choices that are being offered in front of us, what we think the right things to do are or not. But we appreciate the presentation and the descriptions of what the issues are, and that'll let us think about it while we wait for more guidance and see how this winter season is shaping up. Appreciate all the efforts that the coaches and the athletic department staff made, and the athletes themselves too. You said it, Mike, they had to adapt, and they did. And it sounds like it was worthwhile that they were able to do that, and that we offered them the opportunity to do. We're proud of them for being, you know, willing to cooperate and do what, you know, we asked them to do in order to be able to play just a little bit. And you can see how important it is for them to be able to play, even if it's just a little bit. So hopefully we can, you know, have another season like this in the winter, and then we'll see what, you know, the spring brings us for the next two seasons after that. So appreciate the presentation, and I'm sure we'll be hearing from you again in the coming weeks as we get closer to that next season.
Thanks, Mike.
No, I was just waving thanks.
Okay. All right.
Thanks, Brad.
All right. I want to keep going with the presentations. We will have a update on the public health metrics. The numbers came out just a little while ago, and I've been emailing with Katrina, and she will have a roughed out presentation for us, but I told her I'd buy her a few minutes. So let's go ahead into new business. Dr. Clench, you want to talk about the potential for snow days?
Sure. Excuse me, a timely discussion since we have a storm moving in tonight. The Commissioner of Education gave districts a green light to utilize remote days and include them as one of the 170 mandated school days for the year. We're ready to implement remote days during snow days. We did have a discussion, however. There are times during the year where we can call a delay. And when we call a delay, about a third of the day is gone. And with our ability to do remote learning, it doesn't make sense at this point in time to do delayed starts. So we're going to start off with, when necessary, doing remote days, and then we'll evaluate it after the holidays and see how many or if we've used any days at that time. Tomorrow, I'm really not quite sure what it's going to bring. I'm not anticipating a a remote day at this point in time. Excuse me, our road temperatures are okay. They're warm enough so that the snow should melt when it hits the surface. It's just a matter of the storm keeps delaying its conversion from rain to snow, and it's going to start later on in the morning, about 6 o'clock or so. If those temperatures dip down in the mid 20s, 25, 27 degrees, it may cool the asphalt enough where the snow starts to stick and it starts to ice. I guess that brings me to the discussion is there are certain times when storms are coming through and we're pretty sure that we're going to have to close for the day, or in this case, offer a remote learning day. And we've done that throughout the years. This storm, however, is not one of those storms. So I will be up at 3:30 in the morning talking to a number of superintendents, police department, DPWs, etc. And we will ascertain as close as we can to 5 o'clock whether or not we're going to have a regular day of school or whether we're going to call a remote day. Whenever possible, if we can predict that there is no way that we can open the next day, we will call a remote day the night before. But again, this isn't one of those storms.
I have a question, and I'd like to see what other school committee members think. Are we assuming that any day that you feel we need to not be in person because of weather conditions, that it will be by default be a remote day, or are we giving ourselves the opportunity to say most of the time it'll be a remote day, but we reserve the right to, if we just want to have an old-fashioned snow day, have an old-fashioned snow day?
We can certainly do that if we reach a point of time where we all feel that those days would be valuable for a break. We can certainly take a couple of snow days. As you all know, every snow day, true snow day that we tack on another day in June. So it's always a balance. People sometimes enjoy snow days when they happen, but then tend to regret the fact that we have to pick up days in June. So it's kind of a
my personal inclination is to think that most, if not, up to maybe one or two of them are going to be remote days. But it might be nice if you're going to be in the meteorology business anyway, Kelly, maybe you can pick a day where the snow's going to end and then it's going to be a nice sunshiny day after, it ends, and the kids can go outside and do what they do in the snow. Maybe that would be something you keep in your hip pocket and throw out there when you think it's appropriate.
Definitely. It's nice every now and again to just have a snow day and go out and play in the snow. So I'll certainly, as you say, keep that in my back pocket. I do have other people giving me advice during these days. I always have a few high school students tweeting me and encouraging me with closing schools for the day. I don't think I've ever had any students want me to keep schools open, but maybe there will be a first.
All right. Are there any other school committee members that have any input or thoughts on what Dr. Clenchey is presenting in terms of how we might proceed with the weather this year?
I think we should leave it at our discretion. I think most should be remote, but keep the option open.
Yeah, I guess I have two thoughts. One is I'm glad we can be optimistic that this meeting will be over by 3:30 in the morning. The second is, as a school committee member, I don't want to be choosing snow days. That's one thing. I prefer to stay out of that controversy if we can. I trust their superintendent.
Mm-hmm. Dorothy, I see a couple of hands raised. Do we want to see
We
if
have
we
a
can?
few questions, yes. Eileen W., please state your name, your street, and your question, please.
Hi, it's Eileen Wiedegardner, Maplehurst Road. When it comes to snow days, I just had a concern. I don't have a problem with us doing remote days online and whatnot, and I like that people are saying there may be days that you just do remote. But what happens to students if a lot of kids can go, but there's a section of town which could potentially happen tomorrow, given that there are so many, when you lose power? Will kids be penalized if they can't get on for remote days when everyone's going on and they can't? As a parent, I just want to make sure that if my kids can't get online, that they're not going to be in a worse position because 50, 60% of the town could get on and they couldn't.
Right. That's a good question, Eileen. One of the things I would consider is if we did have a power loss, and it was a significant power loss throughout town, we would call a typical snow day and make that day up. But there are occasions where we have a section in town that's out of power, and if that doesn't involve a lot of families, we would go ahead with the remote day, and those students that are affected by a power loss would not be penalized in any way.
And if there were, is there any way we could do like the snow day pack where there could be something for students to work on that they could do at home?
Well,
I just don't like, I part of me would like my children to be able to do something, even when, because I've already had this happen once and it had nothing to do with the weather. My box just went and my kids were at home kind of stuck for the day because they're remote learners. So could there be something that the school would come up with to make sure that students they could do something? And I don't want to put more pressure on teachers than they already have on them. Like, I guess, trying to find that balance.
It really depends, Eileen, on whether or not there's an opportunity to communicate prior to that power going off. It wouldn't be that difficult for teachers to be able to email their students and give them a few resources. We also have that resource page that we created last year that students could access during those times. Hoping that we don't have many of them. I think back, there are very few times that I remember in this community where we've only had a small section of town out. It usually happens, there's a larger section, and then depending on where the issue is, sometimes the power comes back on fairly quickly, or it doesn't. But we'll certainly keep that in mind.
Thankfully, we have an awesome light department, but or electric department. But yeah, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Eileen.
Tracy Tetchy, please state your name, your street, and your question, please.
Hi, my name's Tracy Tetchy. I'm a fourth grade teacher. I live in Woburn. It's more so just a comment or a sense of anxiety that I got when we were talking about snow days becoming remote days. I think it's great that with the technology that we have, that it's something that we're able to do. I just know that internet, with Google Meet and glitchiness, it comes with the territory of being in the Google Meet and online learning. But I'm picturing snow on internet wires and it just causing more glitchiness and things like that. So I just wanted to mention it as something to think about, so that it's just one less thing for the kids to stress about, the glitching in and out. It already happens sometimes, and I just fear that a snowstorm might cause it to be even worse. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Tracy. You bring a good point. We can definitely ask the administration to, if we go through this, to see how the day went, and if we feel like that it's not meeting our expectations, then we can switch to a more traditional way of dealing with those weather days.
And typically, that's not the case, but it doesn't mean that it won't ever happen. As many of you know, I've spent many years in a much colder climate with internet and those temperatures that I was used to at that time were in the high -30s, -40s, and our internet systems were pretty solid during that time. But again, it doesn't mean that there wouldn't be an occasion where that isn't the case, but we will monitor it.
All right. Thank you, Tracy. All right. I think we can continue to move on. Next, we're going to talk about dates for families to review their decision requesting remote and hybrid learning plans. We've talked about this in general terms, but enough questions have been raised. We thought it would be a good idea for us to kind of put the stake in the ground so people can start to plan or know when they need to start planning on how we might want to proceed as we move into another part of the school year.
Sure. Excuse me, if Dorothy, could you put the slides up, please? And Mike, if it's okay with you, I'd like to combine items 2 and 4 because they really are related to each other.
Yeah, that is fine. And 4 would be a review of the learning models.
Correct. And the second slide, please. So the slides are actually a little bit out of order. When we talked about remote and hybrid learning, we felt it was imperative that we had an opportunity for families to review how well it was working for their children throughout the year. Transition to grade 8, we use a trimester system, so we would take a look at that trimester date. And we have a slide that shows the exact dates. What we'd like, though, is we want a window of opportunity for people to fill out an electronic form requesting a change of learning mode. And after that, we're going to need some time to process how many people would like to change. And again, it's an unknown. We're not sure whether, we'll have very few people requesting changes or a moderate number or even more. So we really need time to figure out whether we need to restructure a bit. I do have to say, though, if you look at K-5, we were able to assign remote teachers in each grade and also hybrid classroom teachers. When we look at the way we've created these opportunities for learning models, there are some limitations, and our classrooms at 6 feet of distance can only hold so many students, and a number of our classrooms are pretty well tapped to that point. It does vary from classroom to classroom. Another consideration that we really need to take into account is that our remote teachers already have sufficient class sizes. So if somebody wanted to go from hybrid to remote, depending on the number, we may actually leave them in the hybrid classroom and they would be fully remote. We want to make sure our classes are balanced. Plus, philosophically, we really don't want to be changing our students' teachers during the year or midway through the year. It's just not a good way to continue to develop relationships with staff and students. So in our high school, we all know that our hybrid and remote model are together with the same teachers. The hybrid model, though, we do have to take a look at the number of students that we have in middle school and high school in those classrooms, and at that time determine how many more students that we could take into those classrooms with a 6 feet or 6 foot more correctly social distance requirement. Who knows what that's going to bring? I know the high school would be a semester change, so that would be in late January, and the metrics would also determine whether or not we could consider changing that distance requirement, but it just depends on what those metrics are going to show at that point in time. I'm going to ask Mrs. Steele to talk about the actual time frames that we've created and also go over a sample electronic form that we're going to use for families.
Sure. So we have the timeline up on the screen now on that slide. And so it looks a little different because, as we've said before, at other meetings when we've talked about this, some of our schools are on trimester schedules and others are on semester schedules. And so our grades that are on trimesters, which would be grades transitional through grade 8, any student that is in these grades, the family would receive the Google form. That is the Google form to request a change in learning model. That form will go out to those families on December 1st. It is due back on December 11th. So it gives you some time to think about it and consider. but we ask that they are back on December 11th, which is the last day of the first trimester. Our goal then would be to have those adjustments or those changes, as Dr. Clenchey said, if we can go by those requests based on spacing and availability, our goal would be to have those changes in place for January 4th. For the semester schedules, our pre-K and our kindergarten are on semesters, and so the form would be mailed out to families of students in preschool and kindergarten on January 11th. It would be due back by January 22nd, which is the last day of the semester for pre-K and K. And there our goal would be to start with any of those changes, assuming we can make and abide by those requests on February 8th. And then for the high school, again, another semester schedule, grades 9 through 12. Families can expect those forms to be emailed to them on January 19th. And we ask that they be returned on January 29th or submitted, because they are Google, they're electronic forms, on January 29th, which is the last day of the high school's first semester. And then assuming requests can be abided by, the goal would be to start those new requests on February 8th. These forms that we're saying are going out, if families are not interested in changing their remote or hybrid or their learning model format that they're in currently, they do not have to do anything at all. They can stay in the model that they are in. These forms are solely for families that would like to make a request of a change in the learning model. And so if we're going to go backwards in these slides. So if we can go to the slide before this one, we have screenshots of a draft Google form. So just to kind of give everyone an idea of what we're talking about here, it will be an electronic form in the form of a Google form. We've seen these types of forms before. It will be very short, just asking what your name is, what your child's name is, the grade that they are in. We're going to ask what learning model they are currently in, and then what learning model you would like to switch to. And then where applicable, we will ask about transportation if this impacts your need or your child's need to have transportation, which they may or may not have at this point in time. So those are the specifics with regards to the request to change learning model forms. Dr. Clenchey, do you want me to speak to the survey and gathering information, or do you want to switch to that?
Sure, I'll just say a couple of things and then pass it over to you again. It's also, on this same topic, it's also important to remember that we have had a few requests to change learning models, and if we can meet those requests and we feel that it's beneficial for the student, then we do everything we can to meet those requests. We understand that family situations change, and we need to be as supportive as we possibly can. On the next topic, in terms of doing a reflective review of remote and hybrid learning, we've contracted with a company called Panorama, and they specialize in survey development. So we're using them this year to take a look at some of their questions they designed. We're designing some of our own questions, and they're going to, as best they can, do reliability and validity tests on those questions. And what's nice about partnering with this company is we actually, for the most part, are going to have national benchmarks to compare our data to. So we're going to expand the survey a little more, and I don't want to take everything away from Beth in terms of what we're going to talk about. But so Beth, I'm going to have you talk about the topics that we've come together and decided would be beneficial to find more information out on.
Sure. So as Dr. Clenchey said, the survey that we're looking to do would be in about mid-November, and the topics that we're looking at including on the survey would be about learning environment, academics, meaning access to academics, reachable, are you able to access and attain the academic level at which you are, engagement, health, social, emotional, mental, and physical aspects of health, communication, cultural awareness, and action. Topics that we have all been talking about for a little while now, that we have already sent surveys to families about with over the summer and the end of last school year. We touched upon some of these topics as well. So it'll be good to gather this data. And then, as Dr. Clenchey said, since we're partnering with Panorama Education this year and having some of the questions that they vet, we are able to access data, benchmark data and comparative data that will be interesting for us to look at. And so what's important to note is that we will be sending surveys to students that are in grades 3 and up, to all staff members, and then as well to families. And so we'll be doing this mid-November, as we mentioned before, and then ideally, again, at least one more time later in the school year, just so we can also compare ourselves to see how we're doing with the way we're implementing and making changes and adjustments as the year goes on.
All right.
Can I ask a question about that? About the survey?
Yep.
Beth, I wonder if it might be possible to include like some of the questions about the technical part of this, either platforms or delivery systems that may be included in their learning environment. That's such a big part of our students' experience and the family's experience. I wonder if we might be able to include at least 1 or 2 questions about that side of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for bringing that up, Brad. I think we do have some of those questions on there, but I'm going to make note just to make sure we have another follow-up conversation tomorrow morning. So thanks for bringing that up. I'll bring that to the team.
Thank you.
All right. I do see one hand up. We'll get to them in a minute. Before we do that, I'd like to see if there are any other questions or input from school committee members. Justin?
Sure. So my question is, if we happen to switch to remote because of the metrics, either prior to the start of the second semester or trimester, will we still roll with the survey just to sort of gauge family interest? Because with the bouncing back and forth between yellow and red, if I was a vetting person, I don't think we'll see much of a change among our community members, but maybe that third semester, that once we get into the spring, we might see some folks wanting to make a change, quite possibly. And I think the more lead time we have on that, the better, because if we're deeming that with certain areas of social distancing that we kind of have some capacity limitations, we're going to want some time to try to figure out how to treat those families that are trying to get back in. And I think it was probably pretty clear that anybody that was in hybrid could go to remote, and the expectations weren't necessarily that they were going to be joining a remote only classroom. They were just going to be participating remotely. So I certainly think that that's fair. But I was wondering about, are we going to roll with the survey no matter what? And when does that the third trimester or the third semester start, thinking forward to the spring?
I can answer the first question, and Beth, if you could look up that next date, that would be great. I have it in my phone, but I'll just talk about this. Our intent is to administer the surveys no matter what happens. I think that information is very helpful in reassessing what we're doing at this point in time and reflecting on what we're doing.
So I think Justin's specifically asking about if we were in full remote and it looked like maybe we were going to be in full remote for a while, would we still be asking the families if they wanted to make an adjustment to their child's learning mode?
No, and I'm going to say that delicately because we would really need to take a look at how long we felt we would be in remote. I mean, I can imagine a circumstance or a situation where we may go remote for 14 days and see what happens after that period of time, and then make a decision whether or not the metrics would allow us to come back and do a hybrid model again. So there are a lot of unknowns here, but if we feel that we're in the red and we feel it's unsafe to go back to hybrid, and we're pretty certain, then there would be no sense giving them that option until we went back to hybrid again.
Okay. I guess the question had a lot to do with when does the decision happen again? Because if we were in the red and then I don't know what you're going to tell me, whether it's March or April.
Okay.
I think just the more lead time we have with the possible change in metrics for the springtime, essentially we could bounce back and we could be in the red all winter and deem the schools perfectly safe, fingers crossed. And that might bode well for hybrid or in-person learning, because we got through the worst of it. And then in the spring, things look much better, or not, but just trying to get prepared both sides.
Yeah, Justin. Oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Conchi.
Oh, go ahead.
So I think that's a good point. So we had said at the trimester breaks, right? So our next, the first trimester, we already provided dates for that. The second trimester ends on March 19th. So
Okay.
we would anticipate being, assuming we're in the hybrid and that we still have the capability to provide the option, we would be able to send out that Google form again for families to kind of consider that. So again, that's the trimester schedule of March 19th. So we would have to look at the semester schedules, which would be the pre-K, K, and then our high school, and find a good date. But we would most likely do it all around the same time. So we're kind of having these reflections and considerations around the same time. So mid-March.
Right. And
Gotcha.
there may be an opportunity also, Justin, depending on what we're facing, to maybe back those dates up. I mean, we've used trimesters and semesters as a possible turning point or switching point for families. But if the theory that we used doesn't work, then we may have to go back and review what we're doing and maybe pick another date.
I think that's a good point. I don't think, this seems like a reasonable way to do it if things flow normally. But if all of a sudden, like Justin indicated, if things aren't flowing normally, if they're going back and forth, helter skelter, then I think it would be appropriate for us to reevaluate. And if we do go through a period where we're just not able to make any adjustments, but we get in through that and we feel like we're through that, even if it's in rather than mid-March, even if it's mid-February, then we can, and we haven't been able to do anything prior, maybe that's the time to do it for the rest of the year and draw that line in the sand, and that's it. We just make it to the rest of the year. But I think we just need to stay flexible and patient and see and use this as kind of the default mode, but it's not set in stone. We can do whatever we want to do. Any other thoughts or input, Brad?
Yeah, I have to laugh the idea that this is what we're living through now is things go normally.
Right.
But I know what you mean.
Relatively normally.
Yeah. So I appreciate this update, and I think doing the surveys, including the students, I think, which is an idea from a resident last week, is a really. I look forward to doing this and to seeing the results. I'm curious to keep us on more or less the same topic, which was kind of review of learning models. If I remember correctly, we spent last Friday in our schools kind of debriefing and kind of taking a look around and see how things are going. Would any of you be comfortable characterizing those conversations and just, what's the sense in the buildings of how things are going?
I can certainly start.
Thank you.
There were a few themes that stood out to me when I was looking at the results. And first of all, our staff are adapting to the learning models, and they're working hard, continuing to look at ways to enhance learning opportunities for our students. One of the concerns, it's actually been a concern in education for as long as I've been in education, is time. Our teachers, like teachers throughout the world, probably right now, would like to have more time for planning. And another theme that came out as well is some of our staff are really having difficulty separating their professional life from their personal life. They're having difficulty shutting down, and it speaks to the dedication of our staff, our teachers, to wanting to do the best job that they can. So it's something for us to really think about and find ways to encourage them to disconnect, because it's important that you do take breaks, as we all know. So those are the main themes that I was able to tease out of that data at this point in time.
Thank you.
Do the principals want to weigh in on that a little bit? We'll go oldest to youngest this time, John.
Okay. Yeah, I can comment on just, one of the first questions we asked is, what do you think is working well? And one of the things that was resounding was seeing students in person, making connections. Actually, we received a lot of positive feedback about the block scheduling, that the extended block time, which was really helpful even for post-pandemic planning and how we schedule our building and our day. The option for high-risk students to attend 4 days per week was regarded well. Smaller class sizes, the ability to physically distance is going well. Students are being very flexible. So compliments to the staff and the students for how they're handling everything. I would say there's a couple of things that I think the superintendent commented already about the challenges that we're having with workload. Stress is higher for sure. Teachers are spending so much more time planning. So I think we have to be very mindful of the stress everybody's under. That was really pronounced. The time constraints, the workloads increased. I've talked to a lot of teachers in the past week, had a faculty meeting just the other day about it. Student engagement can be a challenge remotely and excessive screen time. So no real surprises there. But those are things we anticipated. But that gives you a quick, summary tonight. We are preparing to make a presentation, I think, on this once we have comprehensive data from different stakeholders, different groups. We have created a draft summary for the school committee, and we'll bring that forward. I think all the schools are prepared in the process of preparing that.
Yeah, at the middle school, I think we saw a lot of the same things that John just talked about. In looking at the survey data or the reflection data, it seems that teachers really have started to embrace the hybrid model. I think the work of our task force and the incredible effort on the part of our educators to pull this off has allowed them just to get back to finding some of the joy of seeing students in classes again. But with that, I think one of the great challenges, and John alluded to this a little bit, but I want to expand on it, is really around attendance. Is really frustrating. Kids showing up late, kids not showing up, kids showing up for some classes and not others, kids deciding they want to be remote one day, and then teachers trying to run around and figure out who's in the building, who's not in the building, who's remote, where are they, how do we contact home. These things take away from the time that teachers need to actually plan and implement lessons. And I think that's one of the struggles that they're really fighting, is a lot of the ancillary stuff that, while we knew it was going to happen, there are no solutions to. And unfortunately, it's being put on the shoulders of our educators to try and do as much of that as they can. And so, we as the administrators at the middle school are, racking our brains trying to find ways to minimize some of these stressors, but it's just not easy. We've had staffing issues, which has put stress on our teaching assistants. Finding substitutes, and I don't want to be overly negative, but these are the realities of the things that we're dealing with. Some of this stuff is out of our control, technical issues, right? Lagging Google Meets, or kids getting bumped off, or Chromebook issues, things that were just going to happen regardless. And they've been very good about taking those things in stride. So I think it's really about looking at, okay, where are we? What are our policies? How do we try and get everything in line now that we've got this thing up off the ground and we've got a little bit of a momentum going?
I would say all of those similar things that John and Jason mentioned apply at Russell Street as well. I brought everything home, all the pages and pages, but I didn't bring the summary home. So all of the things that they mentioned are similar at Russell Street. I think one of the things, and I don't mean to sound like a broken record about it, but one of the things that came up is teachers feel like they cannot take a leave day or because we are still, even though I know it's been a Herculean effort to add subs to our sub list, we have gone with jobs unfilled, even with the addition of people onto the sub list. And so teachers feel very guilty if they, have to take an afternoon off for an appointment and we're scrambling to cover their classes. So that came up a lot about just feeling like, they can't take time. one of the things that I was pleased about in the survey was we did ask, what would be helpful to you? And, there was a long list of things that would be helpful, but some of them we just didn't know people needed. And so we were able to just go around the building in some cases and, set up some additional learning spaces or find materials for people that were there just sitting. So that was a really good exercise. I was happy about that we could, take care of some things right away. So moving forward, I think it's a good document for us to continue to go back and visit. But the teachers are being super conscientious about what they're doing. And I think that's, it is difficult at times.
So I echo everything that everybody before me said. Just a couple of positive things first. I feel that we've come together more so as a staff this year than ever before. We're all supporting each other and helping each other out. So definitely the camaraderie amongst each other in each grade level. Seeing the kids is definitely great. And I think that their patience, and they're so much more patient than I think we are as adults and as teachers. They're managing the tech glitches and I can't find this paper and it's on mute and I need mom to help me, but where's mom? So they're taking it in stride. I think we take it as, the time is ticking. And that's where I think the teachers right now, that's like John said, their stress level of getting the curriculum taught to them and waiting for the kids to find the materials, get the materials. The live streaming is still a bit of a challenge to, at this age level, they're 5, 6, and 7. So they're tiny. They need the support of the parents, and the parents are trying their best. A lot of them are working, so they're trying to manage that. I feel like that's a stress level with the parents that I hear on a weekly basis, that they're trying to manage helping their kids on the remote days, but also managing their work schedule.
Thank you. I didn't mean to put anybody on the spot, but I was eager to hear what you learned on last week. So thank you for those reports.
All right. Any other comments on the the surveying of the parents about, just how things in students and staff, how things are going, or surveying the parents on switching learning modes potentially as we move to the semesters and trimesters? Timlin?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, I don't know who can answer this. Have we been auditing classrooms to see how things have been going? I know that you're saying the teachers are stressed. I know that we see some of the parents complaining on social media and in emails. I know that the hybrid model is going well for most, but not all. And what are the top concerns that you're hearing about it?
Yeah, I'd just like to acknowledge there are definitely concerns that we've heard about for sure. I think at all the buildings. One of the things to recognize is we will be collecting survey data from parents as well as students. So I think we'll be able to address that with real specifics at a later meeting. But there's no doubt there's concerns that have been brought to our attention. Just today, the superintendent and I walked around the whole building. We practically went into just about every classroom, said hello to teachers. We're waving. I think we both took a moment to wave to kids remotely who were on screen, and we took a moment to pause and just recognize a couple of kids in different classes. So that process of really trying to get into classrooms and kind of understand the experience from both the student point of view as well as what the parents are experiencing is underway. But we are aware of the concerns for sure.
Has anyone gotten online in a classroom yet, like from a remote perspective?
Perhaps the other principals have.
I can certainly answer that. I've been in remote teachers' classrooms, so as the director of curriculum, and I know my principals have as well.
Okay.
So we're doing what we're trained to do. And
I just I'm just looking to make sure that we're looking at all aspects. Like, I know that some kids are having easier times at home. I know that I'm in mom group messages where it's like, oh my gosh, my kid's camera isn't working this morning. What should I do? Or my kid's, the laptop won't go on. So it's just making sure that we're keeping track of all of them.
One of the things we've definitely recognized is the technical glitches that have happened here and there. Some days it can be more significant than others. Our tech team has done an extraordinary job.
Yeah, they have.
Off, so kudos to them. But there are things that people are experiencing at home that aren't necessarily related to school technology, but there are some that are related to school technology. So I do want to acknowledge that for sure.
I want to add another piece, another kudos to our tech department. We realized a lot of the sort of glitchy things, the phone would start ringing off the hook in the morning and parents were calling, the two front office secretaries trying to explain their tech dilemma. And so, we were trying to find, our tech person in the morning. And I ended up talking to Natalie and Julie and figuring out a schedule. And so it really made sense to have a tech person. Our person is Charlie on site between 8 o'clock and 9 o'clock every day, guaranteed. So when a call comes in now, we just find him and he is able to talk the parent through it or go to the teacher and help the teacher with it. And that just made a huge difference. Before we were taking a message, trying to find somebody, calling back. And it was just, it wasn't a hard thing to figure out, but it was just when we realized that was happening to just be able to make that little adjustment has been wonderful for the past couple of weeks. So kudos to our tech department for being flexible with that.
That's great.
Yeah. One last thing I would add is that, at least for the high school, and this is perhaps true for the middle school too, Jason, you could chime in on this, is that we spoke about this in preparation for the model. We were concerned about it, and sure enough, it appeared because we experienced it a little bit in the spring, which was the number of students who are virtually absent, either through pretending to be on, using an avatar to be on, walking away, and the teacher doesn't know that they're there. A couple of teachers today I had some conversations about they did some clever things to check to see if students were engaged in online, although they were not visible. And sure enough, they were proven correct. The student was not there in the room, not participating in the class. So that's a concern for sure. And we'll be calling kids out on that and notifying parents when that comes up. So I wanted to mention that too.
Thank you.
Kimberly, it's a good question to ask, because I remember when I first started going into classrooms, it just felt different. You felt like you were intruding because the teacher, was addressing students at home and teaching kids in front of her, and you didn't want to interrupt the flow of the lesson. But you just figure out what you need to do, and you just integrate yourself into the class. But I've been amazed at how our staff have identified issues. Perhaps we have a student that's struggling, and we have an ed assistant spend some time one-on-one with them virtually or in the classroom. One thing that's really been interesting for us to witness is how technologically astute our young students are. Google Meet keeps adding additions to the program, and there are often times where they're figuring it out before the teachers even know that it's been added. It's just incredible how they're curious and take risks, and whereas as adults we're afraid if we push too many things that we're going to lose everything, but they don't even worry about that. So it's going well, and we, as a superintendent, I certainly encourage as much visibility as possible in our classrooms. But I'm glad you asked that question, because
Thank you. I just want to make sure that our teachers have what they need too. That, I mean, I know that the kids are our priority, but the teachers need to be able to get the information to them with the right equipment, with the right backing. So, but thank you. Appreciate it.
All right,
We have
thank you.
a few questions.
Yep, let's bring them up.
Okay. Kelly Hart, please state your name, your street, and your question, please.
Yeah, hi, my name's Kelly Hart, and I live in Air, but I'm a kindergarten teacher at Shaker Lane. I just had a question or a comment about the hybrid model, and I wanted to make sure that parents especially understood that the hybrid model is a little bit different in different grades. And while there's AB cohorts for grades 1 through 12, in transitional, the kids come 4 days a week, and they're there at all times. There are no live streaming children. In kindergarten, I personally have 16 kids in my class. They're all in person 4 days a week for a half day. And in preschool, they also have an in-person model. And when we talk about the ability to be able to just kind of make the switch to remote, when parents have the opportunity to move into a remote model after the semester is over, I do have some concern in these other hybrid models, which we don't talk about very much, how that will work. Because with a full classroom of students in front of you, and especially young students who need a lot of hands-on help, having one or two students live streaming, I don't know that it would be doing them a service. So I want to make sure that we talk about sometimes our youngest learners, which I think gets a little lost.
Thank you, Kelly. Appreciate you drawing the distinction between how pre-K and K is working. It is definitely different. We think it's the right thing to do. And I think Dr. Clenchey was clear that that's our last resort, is to have someone who wants to go from hybrid to remote simply participating in a hybrid classroom as a full remote learner. But the numbers, and our goal is to avoid that if at all possible. So it's a last resort, but given the circumstances, it may be something that we need to resort to. Hopefully we can avoid it, and we appreciate the comment. That's our goal, is to avoid that.
Right. I think that if that were true, I would have to wonder if we would entertain the possibility of AB cohorts in kindergarten.
Beth Steele talked about that if based on the responses to the to the survey and how many people want to switch, we will very well, if we have to, reevaluate how we do any of it, and to make sure that we're supporting all the kids as best we can, and the staff as well.
Thank you.
Yep.
Kathy Olson, please state your name, your street, and your question, please. Kathy, you're muted. You there? Kathy? No, she's not hearing it. Okay, we'll just move on to Eileen.
Hi
Eileen?
there again. Yes, I'm here. Eileen Wiedegardner, Maplehurst Road. So I have a couple of questions, and it's kind of this going a little while back. The school had mentioned that it was whether they could accommodate the idea that people wanted to change. And I just kind of wanted to note that as a parent, we were asked to commit to, say, for my family, remote learning for the trimester for kids in grades 5 and 6, which I've done. And I saw the survey. I understand when the survey is going to come out, and I understand when the change is supposed to happen, January 4th or somewhere along there. If the school is in complete hybrid, but then say January 16th or January 21st, they end up going back, my expectation would be as a parent that if I've opted to get my kids back into a hybrid model, that is when they would be able to switch back. Am I incorrect in evaluating it that way? I figured I'll get the survey, I'll make the decision, and if they go back, they should go back when everyone is going back hybrid. As a parent, I'm going to say I've made a commitment to something. We're doing the full remote. I don't always love how it's working, and it's not because of the teachers are doing an awesome job. I know they're working their hides off. It's more about my children's needs and the need to see more, and I want to make that happen ASAP. I guess I'm confused is when people start talking about waiting till March.
So
I mean, I would understand if they were in remote till March, waiting till March, but if they say you're remote 2 weeks, then it would seem that my children, if I make that change, should go back then. And I would say what makes me most as a parent wanting them to get back into the classroom is the lack of the ability for teachers to have small group interactions with the kids in classrooms. Like the fact that you can't do these smaller breakout rooms is killing my kids.
So the way we discussed it, and it was very hypothetical, hopefully, but the only time we would have to push the transition for families that wanted to was if we were not able to survey them on the timeline that we are proposing. If we end up missing that timeline because we are in full remote for such a long time, then we may make a determination that the next time we want to, or the first time that we're going to actually survey the parents won't be right after we end the remote period. It'll be later on down in the year, because it just might not be enough time to, we might be so far along into the second trimester, there's no advantage to surveying them just to change for a few weeks left of the trimester. So
And as a parent,
if we do issue the survey,
I'm
and
going to push
Eileen,
back on
let me just finish for 1 second, and I'll
Okay.
try to answer your question, then I'll let you ask again. If we do manage to get the survey out, and we know that there are parents or families that want to come from remote into hybrid, then we go remote, but we already know that they wanted to. When we come back hybrid, we'll let them in as long as we're able to accommodate them. That's not going to be a problem.
And this is where I'm going to push back on you a little here. The trimester ends December 11th, and the surveys are supposed to go out December 1st. Whether or not we're in hybrid or remote after that, the survey should still be able to go out December 1st, and parents should be able to answer by December 11th. And whether you go back January 13th, February 22nd, March 1st, then you know when students are want to come back, they're going to come back then. So I'm going to push back, and I'm going to say that you said you were going to survey parents at the trimester, and I want to be surveyed at the trimester, and I want to be able to make that decision at the trimester. And therefore, if say from December 11th to January 28th, they're remote, then my kids are remote. But after the 28th, if I've made the call as a parent, I want to know they're going to go back after that.
If we were able to get you that and you made that call, we have no problems. But if we don't think we can do the survey because we're busy dealing with other things, then we're hoping very much to avoid that. As I said, we're hoping this is entirely hypothetical, but we need to give the administration the room to do what they need to do. And if that means that we can't do something that we thought we were going to be able to do, then we're just going to have to live without it until we're able to get back to it.
Okay, will there be any special circumstances for children who might be on IEPs that need services more immediately?
As Dr. Clenchey mentioned at the top of the discussion, any family that feels they need to make an adjustment because of the circumstances they're going through, we work with them as best we can to accommodate them on the spot.
Okay, that's not what parents were asked to do at the beginning of the year. And as a parent, I was honoring that, but thank you.
Okay.
Mike, can I make a comment?
Sure.
So, yeah. Hi, Eileen. Maybe I opened up a can of worms here. Eileen, I think I was trying to make your point, which is even if we are remote, I would encourage the district to send a survey anyways, because this gives an opportunity between January 4th and March 19th to go back in if we go back in as a district. So while we might be potentially we're remote, I don't know, December, January, but as we get through February and into March, if the district's going back, I do want to give those families an opportunity to go back if they want to, because when we put this together, I do believe that we spelled it out pretty clearly that at the trimester semester mark, we would give opportunities and families an opportunity to sort of reevaluate their needs, and whether we make an adjustment to that and get more creative for the benefit of the families, not to the detriment, I'm okay with that. But I at least think we want to stick with running the survey's ready. We could send the survey saw the survey. We could send the survey anytime. But we probably should. I would argue that we should send the survey no matter what the circumstances are. And if everybody's remote, then everybody's remote. But if the district's hybrid, those families have got to get the opportunity to make a switch.
I think I concur with you there, and I thank you for acknowledging that. I say that I know I sound eager to get my children back in. I do know there have been hiccups with not being able to do group work. I know we had thought we'd be able to do it at this point. I know that Dr. Clenchey had mentioned that, which is one of the things that I thought would be great about the remote, possibly great about the remote experience, but it's not happening because of G Suite's not delivering or whatnot. So I guess I just want to say that I want parents to be acknowledged and have their kids go back. So I'm agreeing with you, Kevin, and I'll shut up after I say I do want to acknowledge how much I see how hard everyone's working, like how hard everyone in the staff is working to make this work for the kids, and that's the teachers, that's the admin, that's the staff, and that's the parents. So thank you.
Thank you, Eileen.
Chairman Fontanella, Lynn Snow would like to speak.
Yep.
Thank
I just wanted to weigh in because Eileen, you did mention, you referred to your student who was on an IEP, and I just wanted to make sure that everyone is aware that if a student is having a difficult time with remote learning and it's a disability related need, even regardless of that, teams can be convened at any time. You can request to have the IEP team convened so that you can discuss those concerns, you can discuss those challenges, and plans can be developed to address those, whether it be additional accommodations, additional strategies or resources provided, or changes to a schedule. And that would be decisions that could be made by the team.
Thank you, Lynn. Maybe you and I can talk another time. Thank you.
Mike, on that note, I'll just also put in a plug for, we have a CPAC meeting coming up on November 10th, where parents can support each other in this process as well.
All right, thanks, Brad. Dorothy, I see Kathy still has her hand up. Can we try her one more time?
We're going to try her again, yes. Kathy Olson?
All right, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right. So I'm Kathy Olson.
Yep.
Kathy Olson on Whitetail Way.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So I have a question in regards to curriculum. I have two middle schoolers, a 6th and an 8th grader, and I believe they have started or will be starting the MAP testing. So my question is that how quick, and this is obviously for a curriculum person, how quick will we get those results back in order to possibly adjust curriculum? Because is the MAP testing going to show us where they may have lost out from last spring or what they need to catch up on?
Yeah, hi, Kathy.
Hi.
So with regards to the MAP, you're right, we're in the testing session window. Within 24 hours of taking the test, our teachers can run the report to see results, student results. So it's a very fast turnaround as to being able to access the assessment results. And then it just takes some time for our teachers to really look into those results, analyze those results, and then implement individual targeted instructional changes that would assist where your child or any children need some extra targeted support.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Kathy.
All right, thanks, Kathy.
No more questions.
All right, we're going to move into the last item under new business is an update on work completed by the airflow balancer that we hired. Steve, Mark?
Yeah, good evening, everyone. Thank you. So the contractor has completed all of that testing and all of that work. We did receive the reports back, so they will be available. We're going through them now just to make sure I guess from a non-technical person, I understand what's in those reports, but those reports are available, and it's up to school committee when they want to release those.
Yeah, I think we'll try to do a presentation on those next week. And that was also an item that was part of the MOA. And we will, once we get a chance to look at it, make sure we understand it and get any questions we have answered from the vendor. We will make those reports available to the public and to the LEA, but definitely no later than next week.
Yeah, there was a
In terms of
little bit of a
public
delay
presentation.
just because of the rain, and he couldn't get up on the roof and do some of the testing of the rooftop units with the rain and the wind blowing. So, yeah.
All right, but they were able to do it subsequent, and they're
Yeah, it's all,
totally done.
they're completed. We have the reports.
All right.
Yep.
Awesome. All right. Thank you. At this point, I would like to talk about the public health metrics. I believe Katrina Wilcox-Hagberg was with us earlier, Dorothy. If we could just get her up. Yeah, there she is.
Okay. Katrina? One moment.
Yep. Just to remind everybody, the state last week changed the timing. So instead of these numbers coming out on Wednesdays, which will give us about 24 hours to turn them around, we now have about an hour to turn them around. So it's a little trickier, but Katrina says she roughed it out at least a little bit. So she's grimacing. A little bit is probably the right way to look at it.
A little bit.
Go ahead.
We're doing our best. Hold on, I'm trying to get my screens organized so I can present to you guys. Yeah, so the DPH has, sorry, I'm in the middle of trying to get my screen right. Do you see my slides?
Yep.
Great, thank you.
You see your whole desktop, just so you know.
Okay, thank you. Working on it. Good, better.
Better.
Okay, yeah, I still have all the state stuff up, so hold on. There we go. Okay, so the state changed last week when they released the weekly report. They moved it to Thursday, and part of their reasoning for doing that, from what I understand from my contacts, was to include more information every week. So they've started to, as of today, started to release some information about clusters, where clusters are happening, what kind of locations. I haven't dug into that yet to understand it. And they are providing a little more information. So hopefully we can use that information to make good decisions as a town. So this week, this presentation might look a little bit different. I wanted to highlight a few additional things that I think are important into understanding what's happening here in Littleton. As we get more information, I get to learn more and can tell you guys more. So here we go. So this is the daily, the daily rates, number of confirmed cases that the state reports every day. This is from the daily report that comes out. I think it's important for us to keep in mind what's happening at the state level, because COVID-19 has no town boundaries. It's not like we have a wall around us and that's it. So it's really good for us to keep an idea of what's happening beyond our area. So the daily confirmed cases as of today, there was 1,200 again. And then the state has reported over 1,000 cases. You can see them here. Over 1,000 cases in 6 of the last 10 days. We are decidedly upward trending as a state. In addition, the test positivity is trending higher, and we're starting to see upward movement on the hospitalizations, which is a lagging trend. So things are overall not going great. We're headed up the hill, if you will. So this is the map that the state releases on a weekly basis, and it is much more red than it was last week. I didn't do a count, but I am guessing over 100 towns are red this week just from the number of lines. And I want to, as I'm talking to people and seeing things online, as people in town are talking about it, there's a misconception about what these gray towns are. So these areas tend to be less people, less population, and so you can't report a case, like cases less than 5. So these towns are a mixture of towns that have 0 cases and towns that have 1 to 5 cases, but the state can't tell you about them, or to risk some confidentiality of individuals. So these gray areas, many of which this week are green there's yellow, there's even some red towns among this gray area. So what we're not seeing, this doesn't look as hot as it should look because more of these towns have colored in that we just can't tell. So when you look at this, kind of, it continues on the gray stuff. It's not nothing there. So I'm going to breeze by the methods that we use for the rates that we report for the school. Say it's the same. And then we're going to land on the rates that I calculated for this week. And I'm actually going to start with the state rates. So the state was 11.8, and that was higher by a lot. And is in the red. Middlesex County is slightly lower, but also in the red. 495 belt is 10.1 and in the red. Our surrounding communities are doing better. We've got a 6.0 per 100,000. So that's the average daily case rate is 6.0. They're yellow, but they're trending higher. The only ones that are trending a little lower is our border communities, but unfortunately, Littleton is not among them. We actually went up this week. And so we're 8.8 per 100,000. We had 12 cases. And that is an increase of 0.7 from 2 weeks ago. So when we were 8.1, and from last week we were 6.6. So we're still we're dancing along that red-yellow borderline, if you will. You can see that more if we come here. So Littleton is this dark blue one, which is kind of hiding, but we're in this little jagged peak dancing up and down here. So this is the average daily case rate trends for the area. And if you look at these, Littleton's rates, if you look back here in September, Littleton was mirroring our surrounding communities. So the border communities and the surrounding communities, we were near those. And then sometime at the end of September, we started looking more like 495, the county and the state. We're up in this grouping and not with our neighbors here. So something is happening here. And I don't know exactly what that is, but something's different about us. And we need to keep that in mind as we are looking into things. So because we are different, I wanted to look, we know these aggregated rates of the border communities and the surrounding communities are averages across all of those communities in that group. So a good thing about that is it stabilizes the denominator. It makes it bigger so that we can more easily see the trends instead of bouncing in these big swings that we do as an individual town. So that helps us understand which way things are going and interpret the data. But unfortunately, that's also can hide differences that are meaningful. So I wanted to this week look into what Littleton looks like compared to our surrounding communities. And so I'm going to zoom in. So that's zooming in on the green line, the surrounding communities line. And Brad, I made these lines small on purpose, just to remove some of the noise. So please bear with me. I know you can't read it. But the solid black line is the aggregated average rate that we calculate for the surrounding communities, those that are not just our border towns, but those that are one step out. And then the bright blue line is Littleton's rate. And then each of these lines is a town in that calculation. So looking at Littleton, in fact, as I pointed out before, that we trended near the surrounding communities early in September, and now we're branching off and going much higher. We're consistently higher. And in fact, that we've not only just trended higher, we're also among the highest in this town grouping. We have Chelmsford up here, who has a cluster in a life care center. Something's happening in Bolton this week, but that they were below us beforehand. And Westford kind of bounces around us, but they're back down again. So we're not looking good. We're up on the upper end of this. And in fact, when I looked at this compared to the 495 belt, we're actually up in the upper level of the 495 belt as well. So if you want more details about that, I presented to the Board of Health yesterday with all of these, and I went through each of these groupings. But the main takeaway I want everyone to take away is that Littleton is trending higher than our neighbors. So it's not that we're fine and we're in this neat little bubble that's protecting us, we look different and we need to think differently about us. So the test positivity is the other metric we've been following. And the number of tests, I heard someone say, oh, we're trending up because we're doing more tests, but the number of tests on especially our local level haven't changed. They've been at these levels for weeks now, but our test positivity has changed significantly. The state's testing about this is total number of positive tests over total number of tests too. This includes people who test multiple times. So that can obscure what's happening on an individual level. Individual test positivity is higher than these thresholds, but the state doesn't provide them to us in our weekly town by town report. So I can't present them here, but this has trended up higher over time. And a notable thing is Littleton's over 2 now. We were at 1.6, I believe, last week. I'd have to look back. So we're heading up in test positivity. And actually, as you can see in this one, we are the highest measure for test positivity among any of the areas that we've been tracking over time this week. So, and in fact, when I broke this down, just looked at the numbers that we calculate, our test positivity is twice as high as any of our border communities. And we're the second highest when we do that next step out in the surrounding communities. And the only one higher than us is Chelmsford, who has a cluster in a life care center, and they're getting multiple tests to try to deal with that. So basically, all of these combined tell me that something's happening here in Littleton, and it's impacting our rates. And while that's only 12 cases with who are able to transmit, the R naught is 2.5. So each case can expose 2.5 people, and you can multiply that out pretty quickly and get a big issue. So just to summarize, the state's red. We have a 11, almost 12, rate of almost 12 in test positivity. Everything's trending higher. The county is red, trending higher. I'm sorry, except the testing's stable for the county, and I don't quite understand why. It's the only one that's stable. Then our average daily incidence rate for our area, actually, I should have said 4.2. This is the correction I couldn't do because I did it quick. 4.2 to 8.8 because we are the 8.8. We've had 12 cases in the last 14 days. We are in the red. Our test positivity is double anyone around us, and everything's trending higher. And our border communities are yellow, but they are also trending higher as each week over week. So the other thing I presented at the Board of Health meeting yesterday, and there is a little more information in the report now that the state's giving us, was trying to get some, as people have talked tonight, like knowing where cases are arising is really helpful for us to, for interventions and making sure, like if they're not happening in the school, we may not have to shut down the schools. So it's important for us to know where cases are arising in our town. So I'm hoping this information that the DPH has started publishing would be helpful to that. So a very notable finding in this report was that when I looked at the just quick glance at the clusters, that the state is now presenting 80% of them are in household transmissions. So that means, you know, an adult gets sick or is exposed and becomes a case, and very quickly after, everyone living in the house, it tests positive. And that is, we share air and we don't wear masks and we're not distancing from our family members. So one of the highest risks of getting COVID is when it's inside your household when someone brings it into you. This happened in the spring as well. So just, I want to keep everyone to keep that in mind, that if you as an adult are exposed and you have to seek testing, it's very likely that your other family members will be exposed and maybe positive. And so perhaps a safer thing to do would be to keep everyone quarantined and seek testing for everybody, instead of sending them to in-person school or activities, things like that. Some other exposure settings I just saw in the DPH report included social gatherings, those parties, those house parties, restaurants and food establishments. There were some clusters happening there, and then some retail and services. So things that are happening outside in the community, there is some community spread when you look at that. some long-term care and senior facilities are definitely places where clusters can easily happen because people live together. The other day on Tuesday, Governor Baker indicated that cases identified in the schools were mainly happening from exposures happening outside of the school. So just what I just said, like a parent was exposed and they sent their kid to school, the kid became a case, they had to contact trace because of that connection of something happening in the household, and then the kid goes to school and then we have to contact trace inside the school. So again, I want everyone to be, if we can all adopt a cautious approach, and if somebody in your household's exposed, keep them home, everyone home until you can test and find out for sure. And then again, I want to reiterate, we're trending higher than our surrounding communities, and really hope everyone can maybe take a moment and think about what it is that I know my social habits and our activities as a family has changed a lot since late August. And so what is it that we might be able to change to help reduce our risk, and then also reduce the risk of our rates rising, which might mean that our schools have to go remote. I know that we all really valued in person. From last week's school committee meeting, everyone was really valuing the in-person learning experience. So if we want to protect that, we need to do better when we're at home and on our own time. So if we can all think about that, that would be great. And then I quickly wanted to look at the age groups. Just threw this one in here. The age groups have really kind of started separating. The biggest rise in the rates of COVID among age groups is actually around 30 to 39-year-olds, then 20 to 29-year-olds, and 40 to 49-year-olds. So that is some, and then 50 to 59-year-olds. We're looking at parents who are having more COVID than kids of this orange group. So again, parents, we've got to do the right thing, just like our kids are too. And then I just wanted to end on the my Swiss cheese model. So all of these layers, hopefully, are there. We need multiple, nothing's perfect. So we need multiple layers in order to protect ourselves and our community. And these layers work even if you are at home. So if you're hanging out with people outside your household, add a mask, even if you're outside. Meet people outside where there's better ventilation. Indoor settings are really risky, especially if you're unmasked. Avoid large groups. And then if you have quarantine, if you or someone in your household has a known exposure, and if you can, have everyone stay home and get tested. And I think that's it.
All right, thank you, Katrina. Just to let everyone know, last week we did talk about, we had 2 positive cases for in-person learners. Those were our first 2. We have had no subsequent cases of positive cases for any of our in-person learners or our staff that are in the buildings. So we hope that trend continues, obviously. But we appreciate, Katrina, the quick turnaround. I'm curious if any school committee members have any comments or questions based on what Katrina presented, or Justin?
Sure. Hey, Katrina. You used a number that I'm not familiar with, which was 2.5. Something about
the R naught.
Yeah, could you just expand upon that real quickly?
Yes. So in infectious disease epidemiology, there's a number that gets modeled. So this is the modeling number that you probably wanted me to do like a few weeks ago, but that's not what I do. But looking at the people who do that, what that number means is that without the number, if somebody is infected, then the number of people that they transmit to is 2.5. So if I get infected and I'm out and about in a community, we would expect that 2.5 people would end up, based on exposure to me, end up becoming positive. And that number can actually be impacted by like things like masking and distancing and reducing the number of people you interact with. So we can actually reduce that number if we have better public health behaviors that would reduce spread. So the thing like the thing that I just mentioned, that if somebody in your household is exposed, quarantining everyone is one of those things that could really drive are not 2.5 down lower, because you would only infect people inside your house or who you're sharing air with in your household, and not others outside of your household.
Okay. And is this the 2.5 figure based upon like the data that we have related to COVID-19, or is this a general infectious disease number?
That is related to the data from COVID-19, and that's the number that the CDC is currently using, presenting.
Okay.
It's been recently updated, and that's where we've landed.
Okay. And then I guess my other question was Littleton's trend, right? Graphed out looks bad.
Yep.
But if I do the math, based upon 100,000, we only have roughly 10,000 people in town. So it would really be like 0.8 cases per day.
So the rate, this is where people are.
Yeah. So that's my thinking. Is that right?
So yeah, we have 12 cases over 14 days. You could say 0.8 cases. Like, you're still average of 1 case arises every day. Like, it's about 1.
Yeah.
So the way we present it is the 8.8 per 100,000 is to help us be able to compare ourselves to other towns. So that's why I compared the rates per 100,000 for towns, so I can take into account the population size for each state.
But it's accurate to assume, to basically do the math and say, okay, on average, we're having less than just about 1 case per day. So the 1 case isn't becoming 2.5 cases, isn't becoming,
So if we don't catch it and quarantine, test, trace, and isolate, that 0.8 case can be, or that 1, we'll round up for ease. That 1 case can become 3.5 cases, who then multiply. You keep multiplying it out.
Right. So do you think it's possibly, I'm hoping that like Littleton's problem is its denominator. It's a small town with, what do we, 4 highway exits, a train station. We're a small town with a lot of opportunity to move around. Our border communities might be 2 or 3 times the size of us.
Yeah, and we don't have control over that. So I think if we are thinking of as individuals, what is it that I can control and I can change to make it, if we as a community say, I'm going to change X, Y, or Z. I'm going to stop eating in indoor restaurants where I come in, sit down, take my mask off, and I'm in there an hour and a half and my mask is off. Then instead, I'm going to pick up takeout every week instead. Like, that's a behavior that you can change. And then you yourself are not in a higher risk environment. And if enough of us, people who live in Littleton, do that, then we can have an impact on the rates. And you have to remember that everyone who's transient passing through, we may get exposed to them, but their cases are being counted back to their town. They're not being counted for Littleton. So the 12 cases that we have in town are residents in our town. So they're mixing with us and they're being around, like, they're hanging out in our town. So we don't know who they are, because this isn't an infectious disease where you transmit, and you don't transmit until you're infectious. We actually transmit when we're asymptomatic and pre-symptomatic, which means we have to do better and know that, like, that mask is really important right now. So even if I'm on a walk with my friend, I should put a mask on. I know it sounds counterintuitive because we spent all summer kind of not having to do that, but our rates across the state weren't as high as they are. We were really low, and now we're not anymore. So there's just more of it around to be exposed to. And since school opened, we're mixing a lot more. If you think you're still with the bubble and you don't have your mask, you don't wear your mask with your bubble. Well, if your bubble is an in-person school and someone's going to the office and whatnot, you don't have protection anymore. You're exposed to everyone you come in contact with.
Okay, and I just want to jump in there and think about this a little bit. I think a lot of people get focused on restaurants, and yet, based on some of the things you told us, Katrina, restaurants are a concern, but they're not the driver. The driver is household infection. When somebody gets sick because you're home with them and because you can transmit prior to, your symptoms showing in any significant way, I think that we all need to understand. And then the other thing was social gatherings.
Yeah.
So when you talk about what can we do as individuals and as, you know, and by extension, if we all act individually in a community, then it becomes a community action. It's a lot of that is if you think for any reason that one of your family might have put themselves at risk, assume the whole family is at risk and behave accordingly, because if you do, you may very well have a extremely positive impact on the community. And if you don't, you may have a very negative impact on the community because it just happens too fast. And, you know, that first day that you weren't sure and you sent your kids to school or you went to work or did whatever, that might be the day that it all breaks loose. And then the second thing is the social gathering. It's the being around your friends, whether you're 16, 26, 36, 46, or 56. We're getting into that time of year. We had a very long discussion about it last week where the desire to do those things is going to be greater than it ever has been, both because of the time of the year we're in, but also because of the fatigue that we're all going through and the false sense of security maybe, or the overdevelopment of security that we developed over the summer, spring and summer when we were outdoors and things mellowed out a little bit in terms of the transmission rates. So, you know, you kind of said like, we just don't know. And as an epidemiologist, you can probably look back and figure it out eventually, but there's no way to really figure it out on the fly. You can't do it.
Yeah, everything I'm doing is a look back. There's no prediction here. And the more the state data lags, the more time it takes me to learn, which is less time that we have to react. So everything I'm doing, every time these stats that I'm presenting to you come out, they're actually a week behind or nearly a week behind. The last day that this period that we did the rates for is actually Saturday. So we're nearly to Saturday again before we had the numbers. And so, and I will be honest, and I've talked to Mike about this, like those lags will increase around holiday weekends. So the time when we're doing more risky behaviors, if people are gathering with family at Thanksgiving per se, and then we want to get right back into school. Well, if you're looking and telling me health metrics, I'm actually worse off right after a Thanksgiving than I am like right now. So
as an epidemiologist.
Yeah.
Right.
No, I'm hoping I'm not worse off personally. But yeah, it makes that decision making, if you're relying on the metrics and the metrics not up to date, it's hard to rely on it then in that moment, or you might just delay it a few days and then have a bigger issue if there is something happening. So I guess thinking of that, this is where that community cares attitude really matters. Like that is, especially if we think we want to come back right after Thanksgiving, like that, if you traveled to a high risk state, if you were around lots of people, you know, doing the right thing and saying, okay, 3 days after Thanksgiving, I'm going to go seek a test just to make sure my kids, when it's time for them to go to school, it's okay for them to go to school. Or, you know, if you're even in doubt, keeping home until you know is really the best thing you could do to keep our schools open and businesses and everything else.
Yeah, I appreciate you framing it like that. I think we're going to have more discussion about that and think about how we can get that particular messaging out to people on a consistent basis over the next few weeks. We got a clear message from the community last week about what their expectations are for us trying to maintain our in-person learning, but that has to be a two-way street. And if it's not, then all of our best intentions as a school committee and administration will be meaningless. We will do what we have to do. And any input at that point will be meaningless and fall on deaf ears, because we'll know what we have to do and why we're doing it, and we won't hesitate to do it for the right reasons. Anybody else, any other comments or thoughts? Brad? Yeah, and so thank you again, Katrina, for all of your work and your thoughtfulness in presenting this, so even I think I can understand it. I kind of want to build on Justin's question, where he's asking, the very small numbers, small numerators and denominators for Littleton, but the case percentage rate
And so we've been jumping back and forth, yellow, red. We said we're kind of straddling that line a lot. The case percentage rate just keeps going up. I think last week, if I'd done the math right, it was 7 out of 8 weeks it had gone up. This week it's 8 out of 9, and it was a significant jump. We know what the red line is, you know, the eight per 100,000. We have been using for our informal kind of consideration a 3% positivity rate, and we're steamrolling towards that. Tell me more what I should know, what I should be thinking about when I look at those numbers. If you don't mind, I'll ask you to do that instead of telling you. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. That's a good point. So so the 3% was identified, I think, by somebody on the committee before I jumped in to get involved in these rates. And so and when I quickly glanced at it way back when, it was in August, it was like, oh, that's reasonable. But since then, the state has been presenting the test positivity in 2 different ways. On the daily report, they've been doing total positive tests over all tests conducted, which includes the surveillance testing of people in colleges or businesses that are getting them more than once a week or multiple times. So individuals who have tested more than once. And then they've also been doing it as individual test positivity. So the number of individuals who test positive over the total number of individuals who were tested on each day. And that is trended markedly different than the other surveillance level tests. That is, as a state, we're around 5 to 6% individual test positivity, whereas if we're looking total test positivity, we're like 1.5, 2. The state was 1.55 today, so it's much lower. And so then I was like, what is this? Let me go back to that metric. Let me go back to the Harvard Global Health 3% that we were kind of using as our metric. And as I dug into it, it's actually based in which wasn't evident from the website that we were looking at initially. But when I dug into the paper behind it, they were using that as a metric to talk about individuals for test, trace, and supporting isolation, which is the test, trace, isolate kind of policies. But that's on an individual level. So that 3% actually, I think.
So we're past that then.
We're past that. So we're kind of left with that. I was trying to find a good total test positivity metric, but the more I think about it, the more who has access to regular testing in that situation really matters for their risk for exposure and their risk for becoming positive. So I really don't like that total test positivity metric because it's hard to tell what that actually means.
Is that the 1.55?
Yes, or the
Okay.
2.34 for Littleton, yeah. It matters who has access to the tests and how often they have them. And if you look at that line actually from the state, and I should have just left it up, but it peaks every Saturday. It like doubles every Saturday. And I was like, why would that be? And then when I thought about it, businesses and colleges aren't testing people on Saturday. So that's catching everyone else who goes to the doctor to get tested on Saturday. And that's around 3. So the state's not doing well. Like we're not doing well as a state level. Our trends in Littleton are rising right along with them. We look more like the state than we do the surrounding areas. So I know we're little, I know we're small, and that it feels like we can just be dismissive of the trends, but the trends are all going up. And if we don't change how we are thinking and then therefore acting, we as a community are going to just keep having this increasing our risks. And we know that the more, no is maybe strong, but the evidence is coming out that it's the community prevalence of COVID. The higher that is, the more likely you are to find cases in schools, and then the more likely there'll be a cluster in a school. So the lower we can keep our rates, if we want in-person learning, we have to do everything we can outside of school. The school already has the layers of protection to prevent a cluster, but they can't prevent a case from walking through the door. So unless we're going to get surveillance testing that we're doing routinely, we can't get any closer than the metrics. And we need people to be doing the right thing as soon as you know you're exposed, and not only for you, but your family members too.
Thank you for that.
All right. Anybody else? Matt?
And I just want to say thanks, Katrina. I think you've done a great job, not only this week, but every meeting that we've had. Obviously, what you're telling us is a bit concerning. I just think it's important to echo what Mike said is, we want to keep the schools open. There's been a lot of great things happening. My kids are very happy with the hybrid program. Everyone I talked to is very happy with the hybrid program, but we all need to do what's right and, what is important for us to stay healthy as a community. So again, we got to put the put the ball in the parents and families' courts as Thanksgiving approaches to, do the right thing. We have to change our habits. If we really value all these great successes we're having in the schools, then we need to change what we're doing for now. And hopefully, if we do that, we'll be in a better place, in a couple months. All right.
Yeah, and I want to be clear, Matt, you brought up a good thing. My kids are in hybrid too, and they're doing great. I really appreciate their teachers and all the effort they're putting in, that they come home from those in-person days and their mood is lifted. And so I know everyone has this impression that I want to shut things down, and that is not my reason for sitting here week after week and doing these rates and thinking, I do this more than my actual job. Don't tell my boss. But I really want our community to be able to stay open and keep doing the things that are good for us, and outside of, I don't want it to shut down again. That felt miserable. And so if we need to change our behaviors in order to find that balance where we can maybe hover around this yellow-red line for a while so we can keep going to school.
All right. Anybody else? All right. Thank you. At this point, we are at the next section on the agenda. We're going to take input from interested citizens. So if anybody has their hand up.
We don't have any hands raised.
All right. Then we will go ahead into subcommittee meetings, PMBC.
Nothing to report this week.
Okay. I will say, just in that vein, that we haven't thought about this in a while because things have gone haywire, but in the spring we had made some first very tentative steps towards getting in the queue for possibly revamping Shaker Lane and getting with the state agency that reimburses school districts when they build or refurbish buildings. That obviously has been on pause, but they have reached out to us and they are taking meetings with districts to sort of give us an update on where they are and how things are going to try to proceed. So we're setting up a meeting with them, and when we have that meeting, after we have it, we'll give everybody an update. But again, so we're so very, very preliminary in the beginning of that project. It's going to take us a long time before we see any real progress on that, but at least we're taking one more step down a very long road, but it's better than standing still. So budget subcommittee?
Not too much to report. It's amazing how fast these weeks go by. We did email this week trying to get a sort of a regular meeting on our calendars between Matt, myself, Steve, and Dr. Clenchy. So and Steve shared some reporting this afternoon. So we are getting there. We're just not all the way there yet, but it's happening. So.
All right. Anything from the policy subcommittee?
No.
Okay. Just to let everybody know, we will plan on meeting next week. We will not meet on the November 12th. We will meet November 19th. That'll be our last meeting before Thanksgiving. I anticipate that we will have some agenda topics related to how we want to proceed with Thanksgiving and coming back in terms of reaching out to parents and families and making sure we all understand what our expectations are. So we will have 2 more meetings before Thanksgiving, but there'll be 1 week where we'll take off prior to that. Other than that, is there any other business? All right, hearing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a
I
motion.
make a motion to adjourn.
I said it first.
Okay, you can take it. I'll second you.
All right. Motion, I think, has been made and seconded. We'll take it as such. I'll take a roll call vote. Justin,
Justin McCarthy, yes.
Brad,
Brad Austin, yes.
Timmerland,
Emily Rossi, yes.
Matt,
Matt Hunt, yes.
and Mike Fontella votes yes as well. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dorothy and Bettina, and thank you, LCTV, Dave and Judy. Appreciate it. We'll see you all next week.